Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome, Blimie.
Thank you for having me.
I am sitting here with Blimie Heller, parenting coach. And I don't know how many times, but it's been more than 2, more than 3, more than 4 that people have recommended that I sit down with you. Not necessarily people I know. Some people just send me a message on Instagram and say, hey.
Really?
Yeah, you should sit down with Blimie Heller. Okay, let's do it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that you trusted others, I guess.
Yeah, I would say most decisions are made purely on how they feel.
Really?
100%. Yeah, especially for the podcast. There are other names which come up which just don't feel right, and other times it just feels right, so I go with it.
I love that.
So we'll see what happens. I don't bat 1,000, but I'm not batting 0 either, so we shall see. Okay, so how does one... So a parenting coach, like, not therapist, coach.
Yes, not therapist.
Okay, what was with the yes?
With a yes or the no?
Yeah.
I'm not licensed. I just want to be very clear about that. So I'm a coach.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. What does a parenting coach do different than a parenting therapist?
I'm not sure. All I know is that a therapist is licensed through a board. I'm not.
You work with kids, parents, both?
Parents. Just parents, not children, no.
Okay, so how did you come about becoming a parenting coach?
Yeah. It's like where to begin, you know? Yeah, it really happened organically. Like people know this, I planned on becoming one. It was really through my own experience, as a child first. I think then I never thought of being a parenting coach, but I did think I want to do things differently. And then when I became a parent myself, of course, I didn't know how to do things differently. So I didn't really. And then I started coming across information. I started actually doing research, if you will, and came across information that was really very intriguing and very was like, wow, yeah, this is probably what parenting I want it to be like for me.
Okay, so let's be a little specific. So as a child, there were things that you didn't like about the way you were parented, and you said, I want to do things differently.
Yeah, and by the way, not only the way I was parented, also, I should say that children in general, like schools, teachers, principals, I felt like the culture around children was like children, yeah, we were people, but half people. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so tell me more. As a child, what was it and what age child are you talking about? Is it 5 years old, 10 years old?
It's a really good question. I have a feeling it started very, very young, but of course, the younger I was, the less I knew how to really listen to myself and hear what I was feeling, and to trust myself. But the older and older I got, I think the louder that voice I think inside became. Like, this, I don't like the way I'm treated. Like, I don't like that, teachers and principals talk down to you, or that they don't take your perspective into consideration, or they don't, really, really not working together with you. There was this feeling of like, I'm the authority, and therefore you must listen to me, and your thoughts, opinions, feelings, needs don't really.
Can you give an example from childhood?
I'm trying to think of a specific example.
Even a concept, even like a conceptual example.
Yeah. I'm thinking. Okay, let's say like in high school, I would come late to school every single day. And the way they would navigate it was to simply impose a consequence. And then it didn't really work very well with me, because the consequence was to come to detention. And after 2 times of coming to detention, I was like, I don't want to go to detention anymore, so I'm not going to show up. What are they going to do? I didn't show up to detention. So they're like, okay, now you have to write an essay. I wrote the essay once, and then by the time I had it the second time, I was like, I'm not going to write the essay. So I just didn't hand in the essay. What are they going to do now? It almost felt like, they were just trying to get me to come on time without really understanding me, or trying to understand why I'm coming late, or what I'm struggling with, or supporting me in coming on time. It was just all about, this is what you need to do, and so therefore we're just going to give you a consequence. I guess that's one example, but that's not such a great one, but it could be one example.
Okay, the concept, excuse me, the concept makes sense though, right? We wouldn't do that to our spouse, let's say.
There you go. Exactly. So school and teachers and schools, people might compare that to a boss and a workplace, and they might say a boss might do that, which is true. So, but a parent-child, you're right. That's a really good point there. Parent-child is to me much more intimate and much more similar to, yes, a very close relationship like a spouse or a very close friendship, let's say.
Okay, so when you said as a child, I'm going to do things differently, what would you have imagined they would have done differently, or did you imagine you may do differently?
Yeah. I definitely imagined that I would not punish. That was one thing. I remember vividly. I must have been about 12 years old, and my mother had punished me. And I remember sitting there thinking, I was being punished. I hated it. And I remember thinking, like, wouldn't she have been able to just talk to me about it? Like, I think I'm a pretty reasonable person. I think I have a good head on my shoulders. I think I can understand things. I think we could have spoken about it. I remember thinking, like, this is a little really strange way to deal with somebody. I remember thinking, I think I would deal with it differently if I was my child. But I also remember having a doubt, and thinking, like, maybe I'm just a child and I don't understand something. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe by the time I become an adult, I'll think differently.
Right.
I remember thinking that.
Okay, so then you become an adult.
Yes, I become an adult. And remember, it's none of this is very, very conscious. It's just like throughout the time I was like, I don't want to treat my children like this. But then I had my own child and I sort of really reverted into what I was used to, what I knew. Like, I didn't know anything else. So yeah, I wanted to do things differently, but to be honest, I don't think I really did things very differently.
So the punishment, the consequences, all of that came out.
Yeah. Like if my child didn't listen to me, obey me is really a better way to say it. What was it going to do? I had to make her listen to me. At least in my mind, this was the story that I was telling myself. And so of course I have to, make her suffer in some way so that she knows that she can't do it again, or she has to listen to me, or,
Okay, so still not feeling right, and then you start doing research.
Well, kind of. What happened is that I did that, and the wonderful thing about my child is, see, there's many different kinds of children, different personalities, and some children, even though you punish them, it actually works quite well. Meaning, in the sense that they go along with it and they like adjust their behavior pretty quickly. The wonderful thing about her is that she's not like that, and she fought me on everything. So I would punish her, and she would be like, "I don't care. I like that you punish me." Like she would outsmart me, if you will, and I felt very, very
Kind of
lost.
like what you did with detention.
Exactly. Even though I was a much more obedient child than she was. But yeah, she would kind of outsmart me. And also she would she fought for herself very, very hard. So if I would try to get her to do something and we would get into a power struggle, she would not give up easily. We could go at it for an hour and she would really fight. And I felt really exhausted. Drained. I really dreaded parenting. Yeah, I really started dreading it, and it was kind of like a downward spiral. Like I kept thinking like something's wrong here, but I wasn't ready to really do any work, if you will. So then, but after a while, it just got so bad. I still remember there's like a story that stands out in my mind as a turning point. If that was a turning point, I don't know for sure, but I remember it was like one night there was like a real power struggle for such a long time, and I hated the way I navigated it. I felt so guilty afterwards, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not working. And so I started doing research. I am anyway the kind of person who gets like obsessed with certain topics, and then I delve into it for like ad nauseum. So this was parenting. But I was very sure that I was looking for something different. I didn't want to hear the 1, 2, 3 magic and the love and logic. I didn't want to hear the behavior modification kind of things. I knew I was looking for something, that I hadn't heard before. And I did. I came across a lot of information, psychologists, moms, just dads like Alfie Kohn. And I read a bunch of books and listened to a ton of lectures and really started getting a very different understanding of what my role was as a parent. And it flipped my entire framework of parenting on its head. So instead of being like, my job is to make my child obey and to have a compliant child, and they need to know that I'm the boss, it became, how do I support this child to grow up to be as, again, I actually hate focusing on the results. So it's really not about to help them be the most successful person, but in a sense, yes, how do I support this child? And with a focus on relationship, meaning that actually the most important facet of parenting for me is the relationship, is the fact that actually this is a person that I'm in a very intimate relationship with. And this is the first intimate relationship they'll ever have. Yeah, and also more than that, it's that as a parent, I had this innate sort of tendency to view it as a relationship. Like, yeah, I wanted to nurture this child. I wanted to have a relationship with her more than anything. And I found that all my parenting strategies were kind of like really taking away from the relationship. Like we mentioned before we started, was it or not? Or I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, like in an intimate relationship, let's say with a spouse, like how wonderful would that relationship be if you were punishing each other and threatening each other and trying to get each other to comply? Like that's an awful way to live with another person.
Yes. But what, right, I definitely hear that aspect. But if you say, I'm trying to be in relationship with, what are some of the, I don't know, what's some of the texture of that relationship? What are we looking for that relationship to have? It's definitely different than,
Correct. It's definitely a different, first of all, it's a hierarchical relationship, right? I am the parent. I am the one who's leading and guiding. I am the one who sets boundaries. You know, in an intimate relationship, it's peer. We're both like, it's not hierarchical. One's not above the other. One doesn't hold more power. As a parent, I do hold a lot more power than my child, and as I should, meaning like because my child is an underdeveloped human with an underdeveloped brain, and if they held as much power as I did, they might end up in a lot of trouble. So yeah, there is that aspect, which that's what makes everything so tricky. That's why I find it so easy to then lose sight of the relationship, and it becomes all about me making sure they're doing the right thing, me making sure that they're learning the right thing, me making sure that everything that needs to get done is getting done, which I want to acknowledge is a really, really it's a very real aspect of parenting, meaning making sure that my child brushes their teeth and goes to bed on time is a very real aspect of parenting that I can't ignore, otherwise I'm being neglectful. And that could be very tricky to navigate in a way that is still honoring the relationship aspect, right?
makes sense.
Yeah, like it's very easy to start going into threats because I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, my child needs to brush her teeth, they're refusing to. So it's like, just do it or else, you know? And I have compassion for that, meaning I try to be really clear when I share my parenting ideas that none of this is about not being human, never threatening or never yelling, or of course we lose it. You know, I think I will for the rest of my life because I'm a human being. You know, I act out of alignment with my values all the time, but the general framework that I view parenting through or that I operate from is very different than the way it used to be. I used to see it very differently, and now I see it differently. And even though I'm human and I make mistakes, my children, I believe, get a very different experience. Even though I still do things like threatening, and I don't punish, but I will get upset and
Oh, so when you're looking to set boundaries or ensure compliance in certain ways, what are some alternatives?
yeah. So the I guess the bottom line of my approach is that I really, really look to work with my children rather than to get them to comply. So, of course, sometimes I'll be left with very little options because we're rushing and I don't have the willingness or the energy to work with them. And so I will just try to get them to comply in whichever way I could. But that's not my my go-to, or that's not my
Ideal.
Not even my ideal. It's not even the way I actually even think of doing parenting. For example, when the way I was raised, or most of my generation, or the way many kids are raised, I believe nowadays, is that that's the ideal. It's like the entire parenting is getting our kids to comply. Like that's the and how do we do it? Through rewards, through punishments. This idea of working together, I find, is very novel to a lot of people. But that's really how I try to operate as much as possible. We try to work together. They're a human being just like I am. Just like I said when I was 12 years old and I was like, why can't she talk to me? I try to talk to my children. Now, the thing is that when people hear this is the tricky part, is when people hear this, they're like, I can't talk to a 3-year-old. Parents imagine it. They say, okay, I try talking to my child. Or they say, oh, the child's not going to talk to you, or they're not going to work together with you. Or they say, I tried talking to my child. I asked nicely and it didn't work. And so what working together means is really, it's a whole art, if you will. Like, it's not just like, oh, working together.
Another strategy to get them to listen.
Exactly. Working together is kind of a philosophy on its own. And there's so much for me there's a lot to understand in order to learn does it actually mean to work together with my child. And I find there's a lot of unlearning to do, because without even realizing, many of us are, because of the way I think we were raised and because of the way people treat children in our culture, where we operate with children in a very specific way, and it comes very naturally to us, and it's very hard to break out of that. So for me, I actually try to work together with my children, and I would say like 90% of the time it works. Meaning 90% of the time, like that's whatever needs to get done gets done, you know? And so then the other 10% of the time it doesn't, and I lose it, or I, bribe, or I do the things that everybody does.
So, okay, let's bring a practical example. So I've the past couple of weeks, some of my kids, every day someone else doesn't want to go to school.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I don't want to go to school today.
Yeah, like how to navigate that.
Yeah.
It's so hard. First of all, I just want to say, because that for me, it's for me when my children were complaining, I don't want to go to school. Like it's very, very challenging. I don't know. It's hard to watch them. First of all, that they feel sad about going. It's hard to send them when they don't want to go. But also, it's really hard because it's like frustrating. In the morning we're rushing, we're trying to go, and it's like I don't have the space to listen to you, and you're refusing to go. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I don't know. For me, it was one of the most painful parts of. Yeah, when my children were younger and refusing to go to school. But so there's a few things. It's that first, there's the idea of empathy, is understanding my child's perspective. Rather than being so focused on my agenda of like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure they get to school, or oh my goodness, which makes so much sense. Like there's also a lot going on inside of me as a parent when my child refuses. I might have worries like, oh my gosh, what if this happens every single day? Or what does it mean? Or what's going on at school? Or oh my gosh, I just need to make sure they go though. And that is very, that's another piece for me is that's very important, is that working together includes me, meaning that I exist also as the parent. It's not just my child. And so I want to take time to be with my own feelings maybe too. But there is this idea of empathy, which means taking time to slow down and really understand where my child's coming from. Because very, very often, their refusal is not so much a plan to not go to school as much as it's an expression of actually an experience that they're having. Like, children are not very logical, and they're not very good. They don't have many skills. The younger they are, the less skills they have. And so, I always say as an adult, there's some days I just really don't want to do the laundry. And if I was a child, I might express it as, I don't want to do the laundry. I'm not doing the laundry today. I don't want to do it. Right? Now, if somebody would take the time to listen to me and be like, yeah, you don't want to do the laundry, I would say, yeah, because it's just so annoying. I have to do it every single week. And they would listen to what's going on for me. And then inevitably, what usually happens is that I know I need to do the laundry anyway. And that feeling moves and it passes, and I kind of feel heard and held in it. And then I feel a little bit more like I have a little bit more strength to do it. And it's the same thing with children. When they say, I don't want to go to school, it's like, oh yeah, you really don't want to school today? Yeah, I hate when my teacher makes us write, blah, 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 whatever it is. And you're like, yeah, it's annoying to have to like do something you don't want to do, right? Like to write the sheet when your teacher, yeah, I hate doing that. And sometimes just doing that already gives your child a sense of like, I'm not alone in this. And they don't even know themselves what they want, but the feelings move, and then they feel like they have more space to go, or they're able to. So for me, that's my go-to. Is the first thing is empathy. But then there's also, maybe there's actually something that we can figure out together. Maybe there's something that can actually support you. Maybe my child's saying they don't want to go to school because they actually don't, they love being with me. This was very often with my children. They love being with me, and it's sad for them to go. They want to spend more time with me. So very often when I would empathize, that would actually come out. Like they'd be like, I just want to be with you. I'd be like, me too. I love being with you. It's so great. Like, how about today when you come home for 10 minutes, we'll read a book together or whatever. And in that way, I'm caring for that, for what they're expressing. And that also can support them. So that's one example. There's so many directions it can go in also, right? It all really boils down to what's going on.
Yeah, but it was a good example. It was well expressed.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're doing you mentioned you do a lot of courses.
Yes.
Okay, so what's going on in those courses?
Yeah, so what I do is I go through all the different concepts that I find are really integral. I call it my essentials course. Actually, I have two courses. So my essentials course is where I go through the essentials, like basically the foundation of this parenting approach. All the things that I find that are very foundational to parenting in this way. And I do demonstrations actually with my sister of what I'm talking about, because I find there's one thing to hear about something and another thing to see it. And so I try to make it as practical and as doable as possible, even though in my experience, you don't take a course and then suddenly your whole life changed and your whole parenting changed, right? Like it's something that I find I constantly have to surround myself with this kind of consciousness, this awareness, this information, if I really want to integrate it into my life.
Is there a name for this approach?
Yes and no. You might have heard of something called, that's very popular nowadays, called gentle parenting.
No,
Okay.
actually.
You haven't heard.
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Maybe my wife has.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of, people call it like the new age parenting or whatever. Gentle, you hear the sound in it, right? It's gentle parenting. So what I advocate for is very similar to gentle parenting, but I really don't like giving it a name, and I really don't like calling myself a gentle parent, because sometimes I'll hear people who advocate for gentle parenting say things and I'm like, what? No, that does not align with me at all. So there's no like one name or something that I'm like, oh, that's my approach. For me, the approach is less about a certain methodology and more about having a certain um a certain framework that I work off of, which is relationship first and respecting my child. That's huge for me. I didn't mention that till now. But yeah, there's like a huge baseline of respect there. It's respecting them as another human. And that's really what guides me. So it's not, and I really don't like, I kind of almost find it insulting to give parents like a methodology, because I think parents are very wise and very creative, and also each person's their own unique person and has their own unique way of navigating things. Just like no two parents parent alike either. And for me, I don't want to tell a parent, do this and do that. I think that you have a lot, like every parent has wisdom and they can follow their own wisdom, but it's more about what's the framework that I'm working off of. That's more important to me. So no, there is no name really. I call it unconditional parenting. That's my business, but it's based off the book by Alfie Cohen called Unconditional Parenting, which I think was like the book that in a way.
His name is what? You're saying?
Alfie Cohen.
Alfie Cohen.
Yes, Alfie Cohen. And that book in a way really, there were so many books that were transformational, but something about his book really turned everything on its head for me and really did a good job of being like, yeah,
The name of his book is?
Unconditional Parenting.
Oh, see.
That's what I'm saying. I took his name. I took the name because that really was one of the most foundational books for me. So I took that name, but there's no name really for it, at least in my understanding. And it's like I say, I'm very clear that it's not a method. You know, there's many different ways to approach a situation with respect, and while putting the relationship at the center. Oh, so you're asking about the courses. Yeah. So the Essentials course, I share basically the foundations, like the things that if you hold those things in your mind, you likely will parent differently. And then I do another course, which is called Compassionate Communication. This I do with my sister. It's based on something called NVC. Are you familiar with nonviolent communication?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you
Marshall
are. Rosenberg.
Yeah.
Yeah. His work has greatly influenced my parenting. I mean, my life. But I really went into NVC because of parenting, because I really, really liked a lot of what he shared, really supported me in being the parent I want to be. And so the Compassionate Communication course, my sister actually has been training in NVC for 4 years, I think now. And she leads it. I've also been training in NVC, but she knows it much more than I do. And it's really about helping parents integrate these concepts and ideas into their life so that they show up differently in the way that they wish to show up.
Yeah, there's a gentleman, Baruch Gardner, who you know him?
No.
Baruch Gardner. He's a Breslov rabbi, I guess, for lack of a better word. And he was on the podcast. And I don't know if it was on the podcast itself, or I've gotten to know him since and spoken to him a number of times. And he believes that Marshall Rosenberg has accessed very, very high levels of information. If I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he almost described it as the way one would describe a holy book. Like his work.
Wow. I feel the same way, but I feel funny saying it. And I've never heard someone say it. I always say like, he really had access to a very like wisdom that's very close to the source. Like that's what it feels like. Yeah. 100%.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's why the way he says, I mean, he uses, obviously his terminology and way of saying it is that when someone does an incredible amount of work and diligence with an intention to understand something, God often grants them truth, and he believes that's what happened with.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really, it feels like it's real. He touches on real truths that are there in this world, and yeah.
What are some of the ideas? Now that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
What's the general concept, nonviolent communication?
It is so hard to put into words. I always feel incredibly overwhelmed. maybe because it's something that touches on every single thing, I find that the closer something is to God or to source, the more, right, the more things it touches on. The closer it is to oneness, the more things it will touch on.
More applications, but sometimes also the more simple.
Exactly. And in a way, his concept is super simple. But because of that, it's almost, sometimes people miss how profound it really is. So that's the hard part. It's like, so when you explain it, it sounds so simple, and it's almost like people can miss how deep it really is and how deep it goes. And that's why the course, I find, is so helpful, because people get to experience it. When you experience it, something different happens. You have your own realizations and epiphanies, and you're like, ah, this is what it's about. So it's so hard to explain, but the basic idea is that every single thing that a person does is driven by a need. Every word you say, every action you do is driven by needs. And the needs are universal, meaning every single human being on the planet has these needs. The way I understand them is that Hashem planted them in us, meaning I didn't choose them. They're in me regardless. And these needs are what drive my behavior. Now, I'm trying to... what people do, what we do in our world is that the way we describe reality usually is through judgments. So for example, let's say now I'm sitting with you doing this podcast, and I might leave afterwards, and I might tell my husband, he was a great podcast interviewer. He's right. And so I'm using judgments to describe my experience. And this is what humans do. We either use positive judgments or negative judgments to describe our experience. But really, I'm not describing reality, because what does it mean that you're a great podcaster? Maybe yesterday you weren't so great. I mean, meaning like, what does that even mean? And also, as human beings, or as I understand it, reality is constantly changing. Nothing is ever static. Nothing is ever the same. So really, what's the way to describe the dynamic of reality or life is actually to explain my experience and to say, so to describe my needs and my feelings. So I felt very peaceful doing the podcast, and I had the sense that he understood me. Let's say that I'm describing my experience, that's much closer to reality. And the impact of that is many different things. But for Marshall, one of the biggest things is that the impact of that is that it actually ends up creating more peace and connection in our world when we do that, versus using judgments. Judgments is very often
alienating, divisive.
Exactly. It disconnects, and it creates, exactly. And describing our experience, which actually can be quite vulnerable, because it actually requires more honesty from me. Describing a judgment is like, it's removed from me. He was a great podcaster, versus saying like what my experience was. There's more vulnerability there, which people struggle with. But yeah, it does create more connection and more compassion in others. That's one way of looking at it. There's actually so many more impacts. And
very interesting. I was thinking about, so we started this shul not far from here, and on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we had some minyanim, and some of the guys who came, because I run these retreats, so some of these guys came. I run retreats during the year, not on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but some guys who come to the retreats decided to come for, I think it was Rosh Hashanah. And so one guy in particular was not, like when he first came to shul, he was not wearing a yarmulke. Like he wasn't in that space. It took a couple days, and eventually he got more comfortable. But are you familiar with rape? It's like a tobacco substance that's popular in medicine communities. So in shul, someone took rape, right, or served rape to someone else. And when he did, what's common is to use like a clicking sound, like afterwards, like oftentimes, because when it's ingested, it creates like a burning sensation and like a way to distract and from it for momentarily, as people will snap like that. So he was doing that, right? He served someone rape, and he did this clicking sound. And afterwards, another guy complained to him, and he's like, completely inappropriate during davening to do that. And he was kind of stunned, like, what do you mean, like completely inappropriate? Like, I also wasn't wearing a yarmulke. I don't care to be appropriate in shul. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm here to help you with the minyan or hang out. Like, what are you talking about appropriate? He's like, that's not okay. Like, how can you just click, davening? So they're going back and forth, and then at some point the guy says, does it bother you when I click? And he says, yeah. He says, why don't you say that? Why don't you just say that it bothers you? He's like, but it's wrong to do. He said, no, just tell me it bothers you and I'll stop. But you tell me wrong to do, I don't care.
Exactly. Exactly. Like using judgments is so divisive, and and it doesn't really speak to the reality, right? It's like it was bothering him, and the person who was listening could have gone even deeper. That's the beauty of MVC, is that it gives us the tools to go even deeper, to really understand what is the other person saying. That's the beautiful thing also, is that you see how that guy made a guess towards him, and he's like, does it bother you?
Right.
In NVC, we understand it in two ways, meaning I can express my honesty, but I can also hear someone's honesty, even if they're using a judgment. Meaning if you come at me and you say, you're so wrong for your parenting approach, I can actually take that opportunity to try to listen to you and hear your feelings and needs, even though you're expressing yourself in judgments. And that actually adds another element to NVC for me, is that NVC is really more consciousness. It's a way of seeing the world and understanding things than it is about like a technique. So if I have this consciousness that what everybody is with their behavior, their words are always feelings and needs, then I hear things very differently and I see things very differently than I used to. And that's a huge part of my parenting.
Oh, right. So in some way, right, very fascinating. So in some way, we're saying like, what's right about that? In some way, you know what I mean? Meaning,
when we use judgments, are you saying?
No.
Oh, okay.
So let's say someone's judging us.
Okay.
Right, judging you.
Ah, yes.
So on the one hand, you can say what's wrong with you.
Yes.
Right. Which one judgment is like, but what's right about that?
Yes, exactly. Yes. We're looking for like what's the truth underneath what they're saying, or what's
exactly.
Yeah. What are you? Yes, exactly.
Or better said, what's right about that? What's true about that?
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when my children, let's say, behave in certain ways or say certain things, I have that. Well, not always. That's the thing, is that's a practice. But the more I surround myself with this kind of understanding, and I take courses and I also practice it, the more when my child does something or says something, I actually, I'm looking what's right about that, or like you said,
what's true about that?
Exactly.
Oh, we just integrated an ayahuasca ceremony for me. Fascinating. And ayahuasca, do I have to look at everything as what's right about that? What's right about that? What's right about that?
That's like your thing now.
But I spun on it. I ended up spinning out. It started going to very dark places, actually, on the theme of like, what's right about that? What's right about that? What's right? Because you can keep taking it to the end of the earth.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Right. So it ended up spinning out, but it did change me in a way where I always use the language and repeating it of what's right about that, but it's actually what's true about that is a better
exactly.
What's true about that?
And that's exactly what I mean. It's like, what's true about that?
Okay, so I want to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
So it seemed like you were saying a little bit more than what I was saying when I gave the whole example of the clicking and the rapé. You were saying, but there's something more, right? You can also listen in that way. Okay,
so you can take it so much deeper. So let's say the person said like, that's so inappropriate, meaning saying like using a judgment. It's wrong to click, which doesn't really touch people, and also usually creates like something in there, like, you're so annoying, like leave us alone. Like it usually creates a judgment in you, like right back, we judge the other person back, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, but if I have the MVC consciousness, I can actually be like, so he started with a question, does it bother you? And he said, yeah. I can go even deeper, and I can make a guess and say like, does it bother you because you really want that when everyone's davening or praying that there should be like quiet? Is that what's going on? Yeah, I don't know. Like I have a sense that like when we're when we're praying or when we're in a house of, God, that it should be, I don't know, something about being quiet, whatever. Right. And so I'm going even deeper and really trying to understand. What I'm really trying to do is touch on the need, because remember, everything's from need. So what is the need that this person has? Like what is driving them to say, that was so wrong to do that? Yeah, it bothers them, but that's a feeling. What's the need though? And so I can go deeper until I actually understand them and I'm touched by what they're saying. That's really, you see, intellectually, I can understand someone's need. I might be like, oh, they have the need for meaning. And they imagine that meaning is created by silence and not doing these things, whatever, right? That's their strategy to get meaning. So I can understand it intellectually, but I'm not touched, meaning there isn't a movement towards me of like, oh, I also want meaning in my life. I connect to that. See, that's the thing about needs, is needs are universal. That means every single one of us has the same needs. We all have the need for connection. We all have the need for honesty. We all have the need for meaning and purpose. And so what happens is if I take the time to listen to somebody else's need, then something in me inevitably gets touched, because there is a feeling of, oh, I want that too. I also yearn for connection. I also yearn for meaning. And in the needs space, I can connect to what you're saying. Yeah, the strategy space where you're like, no clicking, I don't know. That's hard to connect with you over. Mm-hmm. But I can connect to what's underneath that. And in that way, something in me gets touched. And then there's a sense of compassion that I feel towards you. And then from that, we can actually figure out together how to create a space of meaning for both of us.
Okay, so can you give an example there?
Should we use children as an example?
Maybe, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can use adults
that.
too, but I, like I said, I am my like angle is parenting. All of this is for me. Is my angle is parenting, the MVC approach. So yeah, really, the school was what I was sharing with the school thing was kind of using. I was sharing MVC ideas, but I didn't share before that it was MVC.
Right.
But let's think of a different idea that we can think of. Let me think of something that maybe actually really did happen, because that might be helpful. Yeah. Okay. So my children were fighting, and I think one of them was really hurting the other. And I think it happened a few times.
Like physically?
Physically, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of them was she was really upset. Like, she was like done with it, you know? And she's like, that's it. Either I leave this house or she leaves this house. We both can't live here together. Right? And in that moment, initially I panicked. Initially I was just like, how to navigate this? What do I do? You know? And my initial instinct is to be like, no, she's staying in this house, or to be like, right? But I was really, I think it was happening about 2 years ago. And I was already integrating these MVC ideas. And I remember thinking, right, when she's saying that, like, okay, that's a strategy that she has. She's trying to meet a certain need. That's why she's saying that. Let me get curious. Let me like slow down and listen to her. And so I sat with her and I said, like, yeah, like, it's just like right now, it's like you are sure that you do not want to live in the same house as her. Something about her being here is not working for you. And she's like, yeah, either I leave or she leaves. So tell me, who's going to leave? Right? So she wasn't really buying into my empathy so fast. She was just like, tell me who to leave. Tell me. And she was insisting on it. And I remember then also panicking. So that's the reason why I mentioned panicking and all these things is because I so want to create space for our humanity in all of this. I think that sometimes parenting information is shared as if like, you know, there's none of that happening inside of us. But of course there is, you know. Yeah, and I remember then being like, okay, stay with empathy. And so I again made a guess towards her, and I didn't even know myself what it was that she was really looking for. That's the thing also, it's an exploration on both of our ends, meaning she might not be clear and might not be clear what her need is right then. Now, all she can think about is that she needs to leave this house. And so I said, yeah, like you really, really like something about her being in this house is really, really not working. Something, I don't remember. And she's like, yeah, because she's always bothering me and she's always, and so she can't stay in this house anymore. And then when she was sharing, suddenly I was like, oh, right. So she doesn't feel safe with her in the house. So I said, yeah, is it like for you, the only way to be safe is to have her not in the house? You really want to make sure that you're safe. Safety's a need. And she's like, yes. And something happened. When you touch on a need, something happens. There's something like you notice a shift in the other person. Something shifted in her. She stopped insisting on that strategy. And she's like, yes. And something in me got touched as well. And I was like, yes, you want safety. She's like, yeah. And I was like, you really want to make sure that you are safe in your own house. Yes. I said, wow. I want you to be safe too. And we just sat in that in a moment for a moment or more than a moment. And there's something very profound about that. That's the moment where both of us are touched by her need. And then I said, I want to support you with that. I really want to help you to feel safe in your own house. Like, I'm going to think about it, and we're really going to make sure that that's something that you have. And she was fine. And she didn't insist anymore that her sister leave the house. Like, that was over. It was so irrelevant at that point because she had the sense that I really understood what her need was and that I was holding it with her and that I was going to try to do something about it. So that's one example that I can think of.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah.
Are there like is there a list of needs that you're operating with?
Yes. Yeah. I hand it out to every parent who comes to my course, any parent who comes to my website. I'm like, here is the list of needs. Download this, put it on your fridge, because it really is such a cornerstone of my parenting approach, or really my approach in life at this point. So it's Marshall's list of needs. There's 7 main categories, and everything falls under the subcategory. And it's really helpful. When I first started learning this, I downloaded it, I put it on my fridge, and I just started getting acquainted because it felt very overwhelming at first. Like, how am I going to know what the needs are? I'm going to remember them. And at this point, it comes pretty natural, obviously. But in the beginning, I used to like run to my fridge and be like, what could possibly be the need? I just wanted to get acquainted with it. Yeah.
And what are the 7 needs?
So there's 7 main categories. The first one's connection.
Okay.
The second one is honesty, I believe. I hope I'm not messing this up. Autonomy, right? So choice, freedom fall under that. Play is another one of them. Peace, so order, things like that. Physical well-being, so like rest and sleep and, food. Wait, am I up to, what did I say? Connection, play, honesty, peace, autonomy, and physical well-being. Yeah, my seventh, meaning. So purpose, contribution. I think of them as more like spiritual kind of needs. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so got it. Okay,
And then there's
interesting.
subcategories.
So in a situation where you don't have the benefit of someone to sit and go back and forth with, right? So for example, if your daughter expressed that and then stormed out of the house, where does nonviolent communication?
Yeah, well, then there's nothing to do.
There's no communication.
Yeah, exactly. It requires communication. That's why it's called nonviolent communication. But the communication can also happen in your own brain, meaning like sometimes children are not willing to talk with you or engage with you, but I can, first of all, it's how I communicate with myself too. It's also how I process my own emotions. Like so much of MVC is also about really starting to recognize what's yours and what's mine. So much of it about is also how I communicate with myself and how I, like, I find in relationships, it gets so tricky. Like we forget like what's yours, what's mine. And a perfect example in parenting is like when our children feel an unpleasant emotion. It is so common for parents to suddenly feel like they are responsible for their child's emotion and they have to fix it and manage it and make it go away. And that's what many, many parents do. And I have a lot of compassion for it. But what NVC supported me with so much is to recognize like, whoa, that's my own panic about what my child's experiencing. And I can be with my own panic without doing anything to my child's emotion. I can just be there to support them. And so, yeah, when my child, let's say, runs out of the house, there's so much coming up for me that I can be with first. And that will give me an opportunity to then come to a place that when they finally do come back, or even to decide the best way to go about it. Because when I'm in this place of like, let's say, urgency and feeling, oh my gosh, I usually don't make the best decisions. I usually end up doing really weird things. So it's once I've already, processed it, I guess, within myself, that's when I come to a much more grounded set place and I make much better decisions.
Done. Yeah, I have to check out this guy's work. It sounds very important and interesting.
Oh yeah, but also what I always say is because, like I said, it's so simple that sometimes it's so easy to not realize. I did when I first read the book. I completely missed most of the depth. I would say to find the right people to teach it to you. That would be my recommendation.
Find you to teach it to me.
No, not me. Definitely not me. But yeah, like I think that it matters who you learn from.
Right. I know. Baruch Gardner sent me some videos and I started listening. And I found it interesting, but I didn't. It wasn't encapsulated the way this is. Not as much encapsulated the way you're giving it in practical examples, and I'm seeing examples in my own life of where.
Yeah,
it could be very helpful.
Incredibly, yeah.
It's like the only thing missing from that ayahuasca ceremony was like read Marshall Rosenberg's work.
Yeah, I think it could contribute so much. I think you would really, I think you would appreciate it. See, one of the things about nonviolent communication is also the humility to know that I don't know anything for sure. That's a huge piece. If you read his work, you'll understand why. And so for me, it's also knowing that like, I don't know if meaning when I this is why I hesitate to share it with other people and be like, you're going to love this. I don't know if you will. I don't know if it will contribute to you. I don't know anything really for sure. We're each so different. And it's the same with my parenting approach. I really don't, I don't believe even that like, oh, this is the best way to parent. And this is the most, this is going to guarantee the most successful outcome. First of all, nothing guarantees anything, but I don't talk like that about my parenting approach. It's actually much more about what aligns with me, what aligns with my values, and how do I want to show up. And this is what resonates with me, and this is what speaks to me. And if it speaks to you too, and it resonates with you too, that's what I'm here for.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that question is how do you know? Because with parenting, it's very dicey, right? You said you got into it 9 years ago, but you're not done parenting, so we don't know the results of...
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know the results, but also, if, let's say, my child turns out terrible, who said it was because of the fact that I did this. Like, it could be so many things, meaning like it's really, really hard to, measure from one person. Maybe you can do studies from many
Right.
people and then do a meta-analysis and see. But from one
Over
person, like
50, 60
anecdotal
years.
evidence, like
Yeah.
what does that prove? It doesn't prove much. Um, yeah, some people say, do your children like the way you parent? Like some people try to judge it through that. My children love the way I parent. Actually, it's so funny. When we came here to the house, my daughter whispered to her sister, she's like, we have to be on our best behavior because we need him to think that this approach really works. I thought it was adorable because I would never say that to my kids. I'm so not attached to that.
Right.
But they really love it. They really love the approach. I think that they really, really love being respected as a human and being treated like they're a full autonomous human. And
Do they ever use it against you? Like if you lash out?
No.
No, they won't.
No, because it's not about being perfect. It's not about like, I don't pretend that, I do it. Actually, when my daughter was younger, though, she would read some of my posts sometimes and she'd be like, you don't do this all the time. She did say that. And I was like, yeah, do you wish that I would like share that with parents and let them know? And she's like, yeah. I said, that's a really good idea. I think I'm going to start doing that. So I took her feedback, that like, yeah, maybe I'm making myself sound more perfect than I am, or that I practice it more, and without realizing.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Not meaning to come across that way, but it does.
exactly. So I try to be more conscious of it.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Something I was thinking of. Talk more about the essentials. You said some of the essentials course. Because I feel like we went down a rabbit. You started essentials. You said,
And then I went to
nonviolent
compassion communication, and then
No,
So-
once you said nonviolent communication, we went down that rabbit hole. So
yeah, which is really, my essentials course is also very much based on NVC, but in a much more like NVC light. It's just an introduction sort of to the ideas, and so I share the idea of needs, and that behind every behavior is needs, and for parents to start getting curious. I share about emotions, and that our children's emotions are theirs, and then there's our emotions, and it's two separate things, and we want to deal with it. Yeah, we want to be with our own emotions and be with our child's emotions, and and then I talk about boundaries, how to hold boundaries in a way that does respect children, or so we talk about that, and then I talk about discipline. So rather than punishing and rewarding, how do we teach children?
How do we?
To do. So it's based on the ideas of nonviolent communication. So remember I said every behavior comes from a need.
Yes.
So if my child, let's say we're going to go with something super violent, let's say they like punch their sibling, right? This is for younger children, more applicable, but also when they get older sometimes. But they punch their sibling. So either I can step in as a parent and be like, no punching siblings, and now you're going to be punished because you did that, which I used to do all the time. But to me, I'm really missing a huge chunk of what's happening for my child when I do that. I'm only focusing on the behavior, which is the strategy. And it's important to address that because, hitting is not okay. I don't want to allow that. And I want to support my child to do it differently. But I'm really missing the whole experience for the child and what's going on for them. I'm not really supporting them because if I don't, first of all, understand what their need is, why they were hitting in the first place, then I can't support them in understanding why they did it. And then they're left with what not to do, but they have no idea what to do if they have that need in the future. So, for example, let's say they had a need for cooperation. They were trying to say something to their sibling, like, stop bothering me, or what, and the other sibling was completely not cooperative, and they hit them. So they're left with, when we say, no hitting, and you're going to be punished if you hit, is, okay, but if I have the need for cooperation in the future, what do I do? How do I navigate it in a different way? I need support with that. And so discipline for me is actually understanding the need, helping the child understand the need, and then supporting them with the skills to get that need met in a way that is pro-social, that, exactly. That's appropriate.
This is a lot of work.
Yeah. Are you listening and you're like, oh gosh, who has time for all of this?
Kind of.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's the piece that I find really, I'm happy that you mentioned that, because I think that many people listen to me and immediately feel overwhelmed. And they're just like, this is so unrealistic. I don't know what she's saying. And that's the thing, is that's why I say, for me, it's not a methodology. It's not like, oh, this is how you should do it every single time your child. I also just say, stop doing that. And I do that plenty. But I create enough pockets where I do take the time to understand the need and to support them to do it differently, that over time, they learn the skill. And over time, And overall, I would say that's my approach. Meaning like that's, but also remember I said MVC is like a consciousness. So even, there are many times when my children do certain things and I just say, stop doing that, or well, I just do whatever. I don't actually take the time to listen or understand. But I still have this consciousness, this awareness in the back of my mind. There is a need there. There's something going on. I can't explain it. That already changes me and changes just my interactions with my children. And I think how they experience me too. There's already a certain trust that I have that you have a good reason to do what you're doing. It lives in me. That trust lives in me. There's a conviction inside of me. And I think that changes everything. Because even if I say stop it, there's a certain, I guess, I don't know what it is. It's something that you can sense that I'm like still holding their goodness, that I'm still seeing that I know that there's some reason why they did it. Even if in this moment I'm not taking the time
Right.
to understand.
And you feel like that extends, I know you wanted to speak specifically about children, but do you feel like that extends to mankind in general?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what are you specifically asking when you say that?
So, let's say the extreme, like you could go with nonviolent communication with Hamas, right? I'm saying you can take it to a real,
You could.
you could.
Marshall tried.
And
I don't know how successful he was, because I think that you have to realize that people, if there's a huge history, and this is with parenting too, we can draw the same parallel. If there's a history of violence with two groups and a lot of hurt, like I would say hurt, I guess that happened. There's a very low level of trust, right? And there's the person's like, I don't even know if I want to go near you. Like I don't feel safe.
right.
So
There's no
to start
communication.
stepping in and being like, let's have vulnerable conversations where each of us hears each other. There's so much to work through. So it's like layer by layer by layer, you know?
Okay, yeah, my question was slightly different, meaning,
Oh, okay.
right, that's in terms of like solving, creating world peace. I didn't mean that. I mean,
Okay.
like at a certain point in time, just looking at things that are objectively,
Yes.
I don't know, hurtful to others. Okay, I don't want to use the word wrong. Objectively hurtful to others, and then
Yeah.
going into that mindset of there must be some good reason. So, do you feel like that translates
Absolutely.
there, and has it been helpful to you in some way?
Yeah, for sure it's been helpful to me. Like I said, it's a consciousness, it's a certain awareness, and there's a certain trust that all humans are operating from needs. That doesn't mean that I'm okay with all behavior though. I want to be super clear about that. I think that some people hear this and they're like, oh, so basically you're saying there's no wrong or right, there's no good or bad, everything everyone does is from a need, so it's fine. No. There's needs and there's strategies. Needs are abstract, they're universal, there's no good or bad. It's just a need. It's actually an experience that I'm trying to create. That's what I'm looking at. That's what drives my behavior. My behaviors can be really terrible and actually not really meet the need at all, even though I'm trying to meet that need. And it could hurt other people, and it can cause real pain and suffering for others or even for myself. So
Right. So there could be really bad strategies, but behind it is a need. Would that be the same as saying that someone's intentions are pretty much always positive?
correct. Exactly. Yeah.
No one has bad intentions in some way.
In some way. I was
Yeah.
just going to say in some way. Because, yeah, sometimes people do want to hurt another person. But behind wanting
that.
to hurt,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, but exactly. And so if you think about it, it's actually a direct line to being connected to someone's goodness, in a sense, or their divinity.
True.
Yes. And that's what I think of needs as divine. Because
Right. That's what you said earlier, that these needs are like kind of instilled in us by
God.
by
Yeah.
God.
Or whoever, whoever's listening, everyone has different beliefs. But yeah, something
so
greater
what-
than us.
You know what's so interesting is that different people have different definitions of needs. Like Tony Robbins talks about 6 needs.
Oh, really?
I recently heard about 4 needs. Someone says, yeah, Tony Robbins talks about certainty, uncertainty, I think significance, contribution.
Oh, interesting.
I don't remember that.
So that's the thing. Also, the chachma about Marshall, that's what I'm saying. Like he was so clear about so many things. I see so many ideas out there that are touch on what MBC teaches. Like you said, needs, but something about the way. That's what I'm saying. It's really fascinating. Like that's why I feel like he did have some real access to wisdom. I feel like he got everything right. Like as in like the truest sense of what that thing is. So with needs, he's very, 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 what's the word called? Particular, I guess, about the fact that needs are abstract and that they're an experience in the body. So it's a very, very, very easy way to know if something's a need or not. Money, for example. People might say, is that a need? Or,
Right. No, it's not.
right, it's a strategy. It's not an experience in my body, it's a thing.
Right.
As soon as there's an image of what it looks like, it's not abstract anymore. It's a strategy. And if it's not an experience in my body, then it's also a strategy. So very often people will say, oh, like one of the things you mentioned, being certainty or uncertainty.
Yeah.
Well, that could be an experience in the body. That actually might be a need, but it's interesting. He doesn't have that list of needs. See, that's the thing is also is that sometimes I need.
You called it honesty.
Oh, okay.
Honesty may be, right? There's like a need for, like, I need to know certain things. I can't, we're not going to be able to,
Clarity.
let's
Is it
say,
clarity, maybe?
maybe. We're not going to be able to function if we don't believe that the ceiling is going to stay over us, right? It's going to be very disorienting if everything can go wrong at all times.
Yes,
that's very, but if everything is the same constantly, then that becomes, it's beyond tedious and boring. It just goes to like an unsustainable level. We cannot sit and do the same thing over and over and over again, and the monotony and the boredom will kill somebody, literally. So there's also the need that there's a baseline of certainty and
yes. Okay. So maybe like that would be play or something like that. There's like something.
yeah, let's say.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's the thing is Marshall, he's very specific about his words because if they were in any way created an image of, something, then it's not a need anymore. Like,
Right.
yeah. So, and I don't know, immediately when you said certainty, I was wondering, but maybe you're, first of all, the way you described it definitely sounds like needs. But sometimes the language but also sometimes people understand needs as strategies. For example, sometimes people will say, there's a need for power. Oh, there's a need for respect. That's and the connection-based needs. And sometimes, many times when I ask parents, what do you think the need is behind this parent doing this? They'll say respect, but they're thinking of something very specific, of like the child obeying the parent, let's say. That's not a need. That's a strategy. That's not really looking.
Right. Respect is not a need in any case.
Not that kind of respect.
Right.
Correct. But that's the thing with needs is that for me, understanding that needs are abstract and they're not something specific is a really helpful and I guess an integral part of understanding needs.
Understood.
Yeah. I see a little confusion on your face, but I understand it, meaning that I'm not being super clear because the permutations of that or the impact of that.
Right. What I was just thinking about is kind of more, I don't know, it's kind of funny that two different people would come at different needs, right? Because it's like we're so sure of these needs that one person is listed 4, 1, 7, 1, 6. It's interesting, but it's a way of the world.
Yeah, no, and I imagine they're touching on the same truth.
Definitely the same general stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Same general stuff.
Yeah.
But it's cool that you were able to make that shift to read something in a divine way. Right? I read the 12 steps like that. Right? Like there's not a word here that's extra, and every single word I can pull it out like it's a Gemara. That's the way I feel about the I came to believe, which is funny because that's one of the steps starts with came to believe. I came to believe that this work was divinely inspired in some way.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you arrived at that. Was that what was that process like? And I guess I'm asking from the question of it's almost like sacrilegious to say it in Judaism, right? Judaism, that some guy, right? Even though the Rambam says very clearly we have to separate the message from the medium. He actually says it in English. No, I'm joking. He says very clearly that we have to separate the message from the medium. It's like who delivered the message and what the message was.
Yeah.
And if the message is good, to see it for that, not just always assume. Nevertheless, it seems to me that it would take a certain amount of work to go to, this is a holy book.
Yeah. Are you asking
how you did that?
How I did that? I don't know. That's the first thing that comes to me is I don't know. The thought that I have is
Was
that
it difficult, or just you read it and like, this is gold?
no, it wasn't so. Well, I didn't think I realized right away how like I said, the depth and breadth of it is actually my sister, the one who I spoke about. She's the one who read it after me and was like, "Do you realize what this book is?" Like
Mhm.
she got it much more than I did. I really appreciated it and I did the concept, but much more in like a technical way. She really realized and she was like, I need to like dedicate my time and energy to this. And so she did. She started taking courses and everything. And that's what inspired me to then do it. And that's when I started realizing, like, whoa, like suddenly I was having a bunch of epiphanies and it was like touching on so many areas of my life, my Judaism, my relationship with Hashem, like everything really. And I was like, whoa, what is this? So, but the thing I was going to say, the thought I was going to say is that I think I've always been very open to like this idea that there can be truth in so many places and that it doesn't have to be, doesn't just because it's from a source that's not Torah doesn't mean that it's not truth, and it doesn't mean that it can't
Right.
contribute to your, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a difference between that, which, yes, we can read other books. Many people arrive at that and say, we can get wisdom from other sources. There's value here. It's a great book. It's an amazing book. Wonderful teaching versus divinely inspired, which, like I said, Baruch
Yeah, that
Gardner.
was just I think because of the impact that it had on me.
Right.
Yeah, and the way that I saw how much it contributed, and it just, to me, it's like it can't be anything other than divine. It's I think it's just clear.
So there's an aspect of it, I'm going back to that conversation with the clicking and the rape that I mentioned, where like part of the communication from the one person was felt like, because we're in a shul and there's halacha and there's a right way and a wrong way, that's inappropriate, that's bad. So there's a part of that framework of viewing the world, and maybe this is another way of asking the question that I asked earlier. There's part of that framework of viewing the world where there's the right way to put your shoes on and the wrong way. There's the right foods to eat and the wrong foods. For everything, there's a right and a wrong. And then you're talking about something that says the exact opposite of that, and then considering that divinely inspired. So you understand the
Yes,
question?
I do
It's not
understand.
just the fact that a guy with the name Marshall Rose, whatever, could have divinely inspired, but the concepts seem so
To
oppositional,
contradict.
right, to a halachic mindset
Yeah,
where there's a right and wrong to everything.
yeah. So you're asking like, how did
How do you do it
I
now? How do you
grapple with
reconcile it?
that?
Yes.
Yeah, to me, it's not a contradiction. Meaning, I believe that the Torah is divine and that these are the commandments from God, right? However, I also recognize that I'm not God. I'm a human only. And so there's always that 1% space that I can't be sure of anything. And that's the humility, or that's the space where MVC comes into my life. I don't know if that was
Yeah,
that.
it does make sense. There's this Bill Maher has a documentary he made years ago called Religious, right? And talking about, the ridiculousness of religion. And while he makes his point, he brought a lot of, I don't know, crazy people in order to make his point. Like he didn't bring straight laced traditional. I don't want to say even traditional, but he didn't bring someone who was living a very functional or successful life who said they were religious in order to make his point that religion is ridiculous.
Okay.
That being said, at the end of the video, he said, "Listen, I'm not here to put down everyone or anything. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I was trying to demonstrate was that where they preach certainty, I preach doubt. That's all. Meaning, and I really love it. Stuck with me, that line. And what was what he was highlighting there was obviously the extremes of religion, where there was the people who were so certain. And what's interesting about the so certain is that you take any two religions and one of them is absolutely wrong. So we don't know which one, but we know they're both really certain, right? Which is interesting. So so I thought of they preached certainty, I preached doubt.
I really love that. I would say that I relate to that a lot. To me, this idea of that there's, as a human being, I recognize that there's doubt. It's not even that, okay, I choose doubt. It's that I recognize at the end of the day, I can't be 100% sure because I am human. I live with that doubt. It's inside of me. Unless I experience something myself, those things I know for sure because I experience them.
And even those we don't know for sure.
That's also true. Exactly. Right. If you're really, so that I live with that doubt. And so for me, NVC is like, actually it's, it's living in alignment with that doubt or with the fact that I am only human.
Right.
So I can still say this is divine. I still follow the Torah. I still do it. And I see so much overlap, meaning like there's so many things that, like I said, NBC has supported me so much to actually like, right? We have so many commandments or whatever. And, or even midos, working on ourselves. And the way I was raised, let's say we follow these commandments was so, what's the word? Like disembodied. It was very intellectual. It was like,
you're a machine, do this.
Yeah, it's almost like it was very like not connected to me. Like or even amuna and betachon. It's just like ideas that we have.
Right,
you know what I mean? It doesn't actually live inside of our bodies. Like what, and NVC that's why I believe it's so divine. It's the first time that I actually got to experience what it really means to trust God or to trust life or source. Like it's an experience in the body, or to really like to love another Jew. Like, oh, let's love them. Really inside you're totally hating them and whatever, but you're like, oh, let's love them. It's just so disembodied. It's an intellectual thing and not something that's, and NVC supported me to really, like I said, to be touched by the other person's need and to actually be able to relate to them from a place that is really like, oh, we're one. We share something together. It's an experience more than anything, right? So to me, it really supported me actually to follow the Torah and to do the things. But I want to be super, super clear that even though I believe in the Torah and even though I follow it, I am not God. And therefore I can't, it's just to really, I don't know, I find that this is why religions, I think, very often go awry, I guess, or whatever, is that because I believe it's divine and because I believe it's from God, now I am God. That's how we operate, I think, many times.
Yeah, very
I
often.
definitely do. Yeah, like suddenly I speak as if I'm the authority and as if I know for sure, And so MVC really supports me to stay in that space, of humility of like, I can't be certain, to live in that, especially when it comes to my relationship with other people.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is that we are God, but in a different way. So
exactly.
The Arizal had a teacher. His name was the Ramak, Moshe Cordovero, and he teaches that he talks a lot about the 13 attributes of compassion, which we often say like 13 attributes of compassion, but we don't. That means that there are 13, right? Different. Okay, in order to have compassion, we need to have these 13 things, and I haven't learned all 13. I've gone through a few. I just came across his work in the last few months, but one of the things he says is that when I'll give you an example of one of them. Like one of the attributes of compassion, right, certain attributes of mercy, is to be able to tolerate disgrace. That we can tolerate insult, we can tolerate disgrace.
Wow.
Right, that's one of the attributes of it. Another one is that we can see the familial connection between us and the other person, right? That we're one family. Right? And what he says at the end of his book, he says that when we do this, when we do any of these things, so for example, we say, I'm going to tolerate insult, or I'm going to treat this stranger or this person I'm doing business with as my brother, my child, my son, whatever it is, right? That we are not separate, we're family, then we introduce more of that attribute from God into the world.
Wow.
So if we learn to tolerate insult, then God too, like that attribute is then brought into the world.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes.
So then now God is willing, so to speak,
Yeah.
to tolerate more insult. Or if we treat others as family, then one of the 13 attributes of compassion that God has, that we have the capacity for, is that God is described in different ways. Sometimes it's like master servant, but other times it's father son, sometimes it's wife, sometimes it's sister, right? They're different, or husband, wife, or sister, right? Those are all different ways that God is described as well, and then we bring that attribute into the world. The corollary of that, I actually heard from Baruch Gardner. Now, he didn't, not in the context of Marsha Rosenberg, but it's kind of all connecting. The corollary of that I heard from Baruch Gardner is that when we judge, then we introduce God's judgment into the world as well. So like the more we do that, the more we're bringing.
Yeah, it's almost as if we are like the channels through which God operates in this world, in a sense, or something. Like we create the reality that
that's what I meant in this way we are God, that we actually are, but not in the way.
Like the fact that we can create,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. But the fact that I know best and I know it for sure, that's what I was talking. Right. We're not.
Yes.
I can't. I don't know. There's so much I don't know.
Right. It's funny because I had like a very hard time with that, like growing up with that right or wrong, rigid, this way, that way.
Me too.
And I resisted religion for a long time because of it. Like it was something I could not tolerate this approach. And then the idea of that I'm gonna get a punishment, I'm like, okay, F you, punish me. Punish me. I don't care. I'm not doing this. That's a punishment. So I might get a punishment in the future, or I should be punished right now. I'll take the punishment in the future. Let me live.
Yeah.
Stop bothering me. But still, there's like so much of that heavy programming around reward and punishment that all of a sudden something starts going wrong, a bad business deal or something else. And it's like, oh, shoot, am I getting punished over here? So, all right, I'm dancing in these two worlds, like really not wanting it, but then something happens. Maybe I got to get in line. And I came across a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. So there's, I think in Tehillim it says, B'Hashem chesed yisei veno. And he who believes in God will be surrounded by chesed. So Baal Shem Tov asks or explains, why does it say he who believes in God is surrounded by kindness? Why are we not all surrounded by kindness? Why is it specifically for the person who believes in God? He says, because it's only for them. It is only for them. It's that God is reciprocal in the way we deal with him.
Yeah.
That if we relate to him through trust, that I trust you. In many ways, I trust. I trust that you're not like, oh, if I misstep, you're going to whack me in the back of the head. That's not trust. That's something else. I trust you. I trust you have my back. I trust that if I slip and fall, you'll pick me up. Like I don't trust. I'm not trusting in that kind of way. I'm trusting you. I'm giving my life to you. I trust you, which I like that you called it an experience versus a thought or an idea. It is an experience. It's truly an experience. So if I trust, then that person, God says, okay, I'm going to reciprocate your trust with kindness. And what the Baal Shem Tov continues, and he says that if someone reacts, like thinks of God, b'midas hadin, right, thinks of God as judgment, then God will reciprocate to him through judgment. And I remember learning that. It was short, it's from the Kesser Shem Tov. I remember coming across that, and I was like, oh, it's awesome. Everyone's right. Everyone's right. You think there's reward and punishment and heavy judgment? You're right. And you think,
yeah. To me, I think of it as like that I create my reality. That's what Hashem gives us the opportunity to do. Is that the way through which I relate to you in the world is how you relate to me. Meaning, like I'm really creating it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay. So in this way, I'm right. I asked you a question.
Yes.
Right, that I feel I have an answer to, but I'm just wondering for yourself, in your words, about how you reconciled these two ideas, because at first they can be very confronting.
So maybe I wasn't super clear.
No, you were clear.
Oh, I was like, oh, do you want me to answer
No, you were clear. I'm saying, I wasn't asking the question from that space. I was just clarifying. I wasn't asking the question from that space of show me how you did it. Like I want to understand how you did it. How is this possible? I was asking from that. I feel like through a lot of work I did, and I was just curious how you arrived at those same ideas.
Oh, yeah. You're wondering like what is it about me that
I was wondering
Or
about that
how
journey
was
because
my
I find it
experience?
fascinating because oftentimes many people see these ideas
They do.
as in heavy conflict and then it crosses
Absolutely. People
much
do.
more suffering and pain.
Yes, people definitely do. And that's another thing is that, like, you know how you said you resisted right and wrong and you resisted punishment and all these things.
Yes.
And that's also another thing, like with my children, is that raising them with this way and this consciousness is almost like I'm trying also to create for them this understanding of Yiddishkeit too. It's not about, like you said, whatever you think you're right,
Yeah.
but it's not about rewards and punishment. It's actually about a relationship with Hashem, and it's actually about, like, exactly what you said, creating the reality of how you relate to Him. And I would love for it to be like, yeah, the way they understand that, and not like the way that I was taught, you know?
Okay, question. The $1 million question. Have you been able to get your husband on board with this?
With my approach to parenting,
Yes.
I have, but not through anything that I've done. Meaning, when I tried, it backfired tremendously, because I think everybody, speaking of the need for autonomy, everybody resists someone trying to change them. It's like, let me choose, and I am a free person, and stop imposing your worldview on me. And so, yeah, when I first started, of course, I was so excited, and I was like, this is
An evangelist.
Oh, yeah. And also, speaking of right and wrong, I was very sure I was right and that he was wrong. So, speaking of that, I wasn't either operating from a place of, this is really what aligns with me, but I can't be certain. So I wasn't living in that space at all. And yeah, so the more I tried to, like, push him into or change it, the more he would resist, of course, because he was trying to protect his autonomy, which autonomy to me is directly related to our spirituality.
Yes.
Because, right, it's free choice. Like,
Akira, yeah.
exactly. So, and that's another thing with children also, is that we know when children resist, or I find it so sad that we see, like, a compliant child is a good child and a child who resists is a bad child. I'm like, your child is trying so hard to protect their spirituality when they resist you. Anyway, that's a
Good one.
separate
I like
thing.
it, yeah.
Yeah. So I see the beauty in that, really. More than the beauty, I see the real, what I want to support them in that. I want to protect that. Yeah. So wait, where I went off on a tangent. Where was I? Oh, my husband. Yes. But then I finally got to a place, after trying very hard, of surrender, of recognizing that I don't have the power to change anyone. And it's more about me and what I want for my children. And this is what I want. And so I'm going to go after it. And my husband just watched what I was doing. And I think that, yeah, over time, just watching me and seeing the impact, and also just being surrounded by it, I think to be honest, he was never entirely against it, ever. We were always very much on the same page when it comes to respecting children, and very much. But the practical, everyday, day-to-day thing.
work.
Exactly. And also, not only that, it's also, like I said, we have a lot of unlearning to do and a lot of conditioning that comes up. So,
Right.
yeah, I would say that our approach is very much aligned. Like, we parent very much the same way.
Okay, but you said at first when you tried to force him, it did not.
No, it was terrible. Yeah, it's so, and that's
How
the
about
thing.
so I'm sure with your clients you've seen the reverse, right? So not the reverse, but you've seen a different situation where you said it with you and your husband, you weren't very different in the overall
Fundamentally,
approach, right?
yes.
But sometimes you could have a very fundamentally different
Yes.
outlook. So, for example, you have a client come to you.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. This is amazing. I'm going to start treating
Mm-hmm.
my child as a person
Mm-hmm.
with feelings and a personality.
Mm-hmm.
And the other parent is not on board
Mm-hmm.
at all. I don't want to do the work, but no, I'm going to punish. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
consequences. How do you?
Yeah, well, to be fair, my husband also still believed in punishments, and sometimes.
Okay, so fine.
Meaning, fundamentally, he agreed with the idea of respect and putting the relationship first. But then, like, yeah, when it came down to it, he'd be like, "This is crazy. Like, you need to punish a kid. Like, what do you know?"
Right.
Yeah. So I want to be clear about that. But yeah, when when parents come to me with this all the time, and I always say that, yeah, like, we can't change another person, so we're left with a choice. You know, it's like, so then do I give up what is precious to me and important to me because my spouse is not doing the same thing as me? Or, like, yeah, each of us has to decide that the way that we want to go about it. And there's a lot to mourn. Like, I think that so much of it, speaking of what's yours and what's mine, you know, is that whenever another person is not the way I wish they would be, I see that as an invitation to grieve, to mourn. And that's all I can really.
Versus trying to change them.
yeah, I can't change them. I don't believe I have the power to. Speaking of not being God.
Right.
so yeah, so for me it's like yeah, like that's what they do is theirs, and all I'm left with is grieving and mourning. And I find that it sounds so silly what I'm saying, but I actually find that incredibly powerful, meaning that, speaking of the way I was taught concepts as a child, or even not, even older, like let's say we spoke about this idea of accepting Hashem's challenges with love. Let's say, I don't know, it's such a disembodied idea. It was just like, what is this even? And people would say yes, and Hashem needs the best for you, but in the head, it's intellectual. Like, what are you actually talking about? And for me, and this is a huge part of embodied MVC, is yeah, the mourning, like being with my deep, deep sadness that this isn't the way I want it to be. When I'm with it, and again, it's very painful to be with, and I would want people to have support through it. When I'm with that pain, something happens. Something happens where, I'm sure you've heard the idea of spiritual bypassing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think of all these ideas of spiritual bypassing. Like, it's like, oh, Hashem wants what's best for me, Hashem, whatever, but the person's not actually there. Their body is still in this
Right.
place of trying to change the other person, or, they're not really. So, but when I mourn, something actually happens inside of me. There's an experience that it does, and I think of it as really divine. That's how Hashem created us to be. Something happens in my body. There's a transformation that actually occurs, and then inevitably, somehow I move to this place where I actually find myself at peace, where actually there is a real trust in, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's an experience, but yeah, there's a certain peace, there's a certain trust, and that's what I think of as being connected to Hashem, feeling His love, feeling like
Right.
this is what. Yeah, there's like a.
It reminded me of when you spoke earlier about your parent. Someone comes to your course and they say, "Okay, like, so this is the way to get my kid to comply," right? Like that idea. So Avi Wolf, who sat on this chair a couple of times, and he does a daily share on Shar B'tachon. So I don't know if he said it as personal or others, but his point was that some people come to Shar B'tachon, right? Rabbeinu B'chai's book on trust, and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, would advise people who are going through various issues, learn this book 3 times or learn this book. Anyway, so he said the first time he sees people approach it, and it's possible he said it like I said, first person, it's a new strategy to make money. Right. So I'm learning this, and then how come I'm making money? But I like what you're saying. Like, it's a disembodied idea. Like, you're obviously not experiencing what this is talking about if you're still going after the experience of money.
Exactly. And so I find that, like, there is no way to bypass. There is no way. It's the only way is through. And we all avoid that because it's painful. It's painful to mourn. It's painful to sit in that space of not knowing. It's painful to feel hopeless.
Right.
But I trust that so much. I trust that path a lot to bring us to a place, to actually bring us to a place.
Oh, okay. Something just landed for me. So this Chabad concept that Tanya talks about, Mayach Shalta Lev, the mind.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So what you're talking is like that these ideas should penetrate our heart.
Exactly.
Right. Not that the heart gets offline, that these ideas should penetrate our heart.
Exactly. Is that it becomes embodied. It becomes an experience. Like, when I say embodied, I mean that it's an experience. Rather than an idea or thought in my head, it touches my heart. It touches me. I feel it inside of me.
L'chaim to that. If someone is interested in working with you, I know you have your Instagram is Unconditional Parenting.
Exactly.
That's no hyphens, no spaces.
There is
no
actually a hyphen,
Okay, so
unfortunately. Unconditional _ parenting, not a hyphen underscore. Yeah, but everything else does. I have a website, Blimie Heller, my name, BlimieHeller.com.
Blimie, BLIMIE.
Yes, Heller.com, and really you can find everything there. My courses, my Instagram, working one-on-one with me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. It was great fun chatting with you, and I hope your work touches many people, and I hope your kids turn out to be amazing people. So you had a great experience, and it was aligned with you, and it ends up being aligned with them.
Yeah, amen. That is what I hope for. And also, speaking of what we just spoke about before, I try to be detached from the outcome or the result, because I don't have no control over that.
Yes, I saw a video of Shay's Taub today, and he said many people think the job of parenting is to raise kids. It's not. The job of parenting is to raise parents, meaning that they should become good parents. So when we think like that, then we're dealing with a human being, a person.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not about, also children are notorious for behaving terribly. So, you know, if you're trying to raise a good kid, you're going to be like, yeah, kids are kids.
Right. My wife says it often. They're behaving like kids, basically.
Exactly. That's another huge part of my parenting thing, is to really get parents to recognize the developmental process and that nothing's wrong with a toddler having a tantrum. Like, that's what toddlers are, that's where they're at developmentally, or, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Enjoyed it.
you.
Have a great night.
You too. Thank